Carlos Alcaraz's brother Jaime dismissed comparisons with the world #1 following his recent title triumph at an under-15 tournament at an ATP Challenger Tour event in Murcia. According to the 14-year-old, who is rapidly rising up the tennis ladder, he sees his elder brother as a sibling and not as a role model in the sport.
Mira Andreeva went from saying that she's not a champion and that she'll lose her Madrid fourth-round match to reaching the finals of said tournament days later. Hailey Baptiste was awfully close to potentially
the teenage queen and the champion brother.
This is Mira Andreeva, and she is the new teen sensation in women's tennis. At only 17 years old, she has just won the Dubai Open, which is a 1,000 tournament on the tennis tour. Now, if you don't follow,
Madrid is delivering drama on and off the court.
Mira, you have become famous for thanking yourself in interviews. So before we give anyone else credit, firstly, what would you like to thank yourself for?
Well,
forget everything you thought you knew about this year's clay season, because the Mutua Madrid Open just turned into the most emotionally charged, story-rich tennis event of the entire spring swing.
I just feel like I am a bit more mature than I was before.
You're only 16.
And we are only halfway through it. Champions Tennisitics is here, and today we are diving deep into two stories that have absolutely taken over the conversation in the tennis world this week. One is about a teenager who is quietly, methodically, and devastatingly building a résumé that should genuinely terrify every woman on the WTA Tour.
What were you doing when you were 16 years old? Just over a year after turning pro, Mira Andreeva has now reached the second week of a major twice, after reaching the Junior Australian Open finals in 20.
The other is about the most beloved player in the sport right now, sidelined by injury, sitting in the stands of his home country's biggest tournament, not for himself, but for his little brother. Grab your seat, because Madrid is delivering, and we are not letting a single moment of it go to waste. Let us start with Carlos Alcaraz, because even when Carlos Alcaraz is not playing tennis, he somehow finds a way to be the most talked about person at a tennis tournament. That is just who he is. That is the Alcaraz effect. The man is magnetic, and even with his arm in a brace, even with his name scratched from the draw, even with the clay season clock ticking down on him in the most agonizing way possible, he showed up to Madrid, not for himself, but for someone who might one day carry the same surname to the very top of this sport. His little brother Jaime Alcaraz stepped onto the court at the Mutua Madrid Open this week for the under-16 competition. And if you were not paying attention to that, you genuinely missed one of the most heartwarming subplots of the entire tournament. Jaime did not just show up and make up the numbers. No. This is an Alcaraz we are talking about. The kid came out and delivered a commanding 6-3. 6-2 victory in his U16 debut at the tournament, a performance that was clean, confident, and composed well beyond his years. Sound familiar? It should, because somewhere in the DNA of the Alcaraz family, there is clearly a tennis gene that does not mess around. But the result, as impressive as it was, is almost secondary to the image that has been circulating everywhere since it happened. There in the stands, wearing a smile that could light up the entire Caja Magica, was Carlos Alcaraz, the three-time Grand Slam champion, the man who should have been defending his status as one of the best clay court players on the planet this week. Instead of channeling his competitive fire into his own matches, he was sitting courtside, watching his little brother, absolutely beaming with pride. And honestly, if that image does not get to you just a little bit, then we need to have a serious conversation about whether you actually love tennis. This is the thing about Carlos that the rankings and the trophies and the viral highlights sometimes overshadow. The guy is genuinely, authentically human in a way that very few athletes at his level manage to be. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. He celebrates with the crowd. He cries when he wins the big ones. He supports his family with an openness and a warmth that feels completely real, because it is completely real. Watching him cheer on Jaime this week was not a PR moment. It was not staged for content. It was a big brother doing what big brothers do, showing up, being present, and letting the person they love know that they are seen and that they matter. Now let us think about the context here for just a moment, because the context makes it even more poignant. Carlos is injured. He withdrew from the Barcelona Open with that forearm and wrist issue that sent shockwaves through the tennis community, and every single day that passes without him on the court is another day of anxiety for his fans about what this means for Roland Garros. The French Open is the crown jewel of the clay season, and it is the one major that still eludes him. It is the one trophy that would complete his clay resume in a way that even his Wimbledon and US Open titles cannot fully substitute for. The pressure around his recovery is enormous. The stakes could not be higher. And yet here he is, in Madrid, not wallowing, not hiding away in a physio room somewhere. He is in the stands watching Jamie, and he is smiling. That tells you everything about Carlos Alcaraz's character. And it tells you something else too. It tells you that the Alcaraz family is building something. Because Jamie is not just some casual player who picked up a racket because his older brother happened to be famous. A 6-3, 6-2 win in AU16 debut at one of the biggest tournaments in the world is not luck. That is skill. That is preparation. That is someone who has grown up around excellence and absorbed it. Now, is Jamie going to be the next Carlos? Let us not get ahead of ourselves. The world of tennis has a long and painful history of younger siblings carrying the weight of impossible comparisons. But what we can say, and what we should say, is that Jamie Alcaraz announced himself this week. He stepped onto a big stage, in front of a home crowd, with his legendary brother watching, and he delivered. That takes a certain kind of nerve. Vamos, Carlitos, for being the big brother every young athlete deserves. And vamos, Jamie, because this journey is just getting started, and something tells us we are going to be talking about the Alcaraz brothers for a very, very long time. Now, let us shift gears, because if the Alcaraz story was the warm hug that Madrid delivered this week, then what Mira Andreeva has been doing on the clay courts of the Caja Magica is the cold bucket of water to the face, the kind that wakes you up and forces you to pay attention to something extraordinary that is happening right in front of your eyes. Mira Andreeva, 18 years old, just 18, a teenager who is not old enough to walk into a bar in most countries, is out here dismantling WTA 1000 fields like she has been doing this for 15 years. And after her semi-final victory over Hailey Baptiste, a tight, brutal, mentally demanding 6-4, 7-6, 8 win that required every ounce of the composure and competitive savagery she has been displaying all season, Mira Andreeva is into the Madrid Open final. Her first Madrid final. Her third WTA 1000 final of the year. Let that sit with you for a moment. 3 WTA 1000 finals in 2026, and the year is barely into May.
Mira, you have become famous for thanking yourself in interviews. So before we give anyone else credit, firstly, what would you like to thank yourself for?
Well,
Let us talk about that tiebreak for a second, because the scoreline of 7-6, 8 tells you exactly what kind of match this was. Baptiste is not a pushover. She is a tough, physical, competitive player who does not give points away cheaply. She pushed Andreeva to the absolute limit in that second set, and there were moments in that tiebreak where it could have gone either way. These are the moments that define whether a young player is a contender or a pretender. These are the moments where the pressure builds and builds until it finds the weakest link and snaps it. And what did Andreeva do? She did not crack. She did not tighten up. She did not let the crowd noise or the stakes or the proximity to a final rattle her. She stayed in it. She fought through the adversity, and she found a way to win. At 18, in a WTA 1000 semifinal. The numbers around Mira Andreeva's 2026 season are genuinely staggering when you lay them out. A 12-1 record on clay. A 26th win of the season already banked before most people have even finished their spring cleaning. 3 finals reached. And those are not finals at small or medium-tier events. These are WTA 1000 events, the second tier of the sport below the Grand Slams. The events where the very best players in the world show up and compete at full intensity. To reach 3 of those finals before your 19th birthday is not normal. It is not something that just happens because you are talented. It requires a level of physical and mental development that most young players simply do not have at this stage of their careers. Think about what it takes to reach a WTA 1000 final. You have to beat 6 or 7 players, most of whom are ranked in the top 50 in the world. You have to do it over consecutive days, managing your energy, managing your body, managing your nerves. You have to handle the pressure of expectation that builds with every round. You have to adjust your game to different opponents, different styles, different surfaces, and in Madrid specifically, the altitude adds another layer of complexity that catches players off guard. The ball flies differently. The bounce is higher and faster. You have to recalibrate your timing and your positioning in real time during matches against opponents who are also trying to take your head off. And Andreeva is doing all of this at 18 with a 12-1 record on clay. 12 wins, 1 loss on clay this season alone. Where is this coming from? Because Mira Andreeva did not emerge from nowhere. She has been on the radar of serious tennis watchers since she burst onto the scene as a 16-year-old making deep runs at Grand Slams. But what has happened between then and now feels like a quantum leap rather than a gradual progression. The serve has gotten bigger. The movement has become more fluid and efficient. The tactical brain, which was always evident, has now reached a level of sophistication that makes her genuinely difficult to solve. She is not just hitting the ball well. She is constructing points, manufacturing pressure, and exploiting weaknesses with a precision that veteran players spend their entire careers trying to develop. And the mentality. We have to talk about the mentality, because tennis is ultimately a mental sport dressed up in athletic clothing, and Andreeva's mental game is something to behold. Watch her between points. Watch the way she resets after errors. Watch the way she does not let the big moments change her body language or her shot selection. There is a stillness to her competitive center that is unusual in someone so young. Most teenagers at this level are emotional volcanoes on court. The highs are very high and the lows are very low, and managing those emotional swings is often the difference between winning and losing big matches. Andreeva plays like someone who has already had the conversation with herself about what she is out there to do, and no score, no opponent, and no situation is going to knock her off that foundation. Now the Madrid final looms. And whatever happens in that final, whoever she faces, however the match unfolds, the story of Mira Andreeva at the 2026 Madrid Open is already written. She is already a champion in the making. She is already someone who belongs at the very highest level of this sport. The only question now is not whether she will win titles. She absolutely will, and she may well have already won some by the time you are watching this. The question is how many and how soon, and just how high the ceiling actually is for this ferociously talented young woman from Russia. Because when you look at the trajectory, and when you look at the rate of improvement, and when you look at the composure and the results on the biggest stages, you start to wonder if we are watching the beginning of a genuinely dominant era. The WTA has been in a fascinating state of flux for the last few years, with different players rising and falling and no single dominant force at the top. Into that space, Mira Andreeva is stepping with an increasingly firm footprint. She is not tentative about it. She is not dipping her toe in and hoping for the best. She is arriving at these tournaments and performing like she owns the place, and the results are backing up the attitude. At just 18 years of age, she has already won 26 matches in 2026. She already has a clay court record that most established professionals would be proud of. She is already in her third WTA 1000 final of the year. And she is doing it on clay, the surface that typically takes the longest for young players to master, the surface that demands the most physical and tactical maturity, the surface where Andreeva is posting a 12-1 record that belongs in a museum. Let us also appreciate just for a moment the journey that this represents. Mira Andreeva grew up in a tennis system that is deeply demanding and deeply competitive. She came through the junior ranks with serious credentials, but the gap between junior tennis and professional tennis, especially at the top of the WTA, is enormous. Players have fallen into that gap and never come out the other side. They peak at 17 in the juniors and spend the rest of their careers as cautionary tales about the dangers of hype. Andreeva has not followed that path. She has crossed the gap and then kept accelerating on the other side. And right now she is moving faster than almost anyone could have predicted. Madrid is the stage. The clay season is the backdrop. And Mira Andreeva is the story that everyone in the tennis world is going to be talking about for the rest of this spring, into Roland Garros, and almost certainly well beyond. So here's where we land this week. The Mutua Madrid Open, midway through its 2026 edition, has already given us more emotional texture and compelling storylines than most tournaments manage across their entire run. Carlos Alcaraz, sidelined but unbroken, reminding the world that he is more than a tennis player. He is a person, a brother, a human being of exceptional warmth who uses his platform to lift the people he loves. Jamie Alcaraz, taking his first steps onto the big stage and delivering the kind of debut that his famous brother must have watched with a full heart. And Mira Andreeva, age 18, marching through the WTA draw with the cool efficiency of a champion who has already decided where she is going and is simply in the process of getting there. What a sport. What a tournament. What a week. As for what comes next, the final for Andreeva, the recovery countdown for Carlos, the Roland Garros question that hangs over all of it like a storm cloud that everyone is desperate will pass before Paris. You're going to want to stay close, because this clay season is not done delivering, and Champions Tennisitics is not done covering it. If you made it this far, you already know what to do. Hit that like button, because this content takes real work and your support means everything to this channel. Drop a comment below. Tell us what you think about Andreeva's run. Tell us how you feel about Carlos watching from the stands. Tell us your predictions for Roland Garros, because we read every single comment and we genuinely love hearing from you. And if you have not subscribed yet, what exactly are you waiting for? Champions Tennisitics is where the tennis conversation lives, and we are just getting warmed up. Subscribe, hit the bell, and we will see you in the next one.
Mira, you have become famous for thanking yourself in interviews. So before we give anyone else credit, firstly, what would you like to thank yourself for?
Well,
She chilled as a coach?
no. I would say that she's okay coach, you know.